of La Penta. This is WICR.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sports Ball. Jersey Joe back in action, and look, the semester has started, the doors are open, we are fully back in action, and I could not be happier. College football is here. I mean, the season is just here, the countdown is over, and overall, I mean, I think everybody who follows my stuff closely knows how big of a college football guy I am. College Football Corner is the TV show that I did with Anthony Carlo. Excellent, really enjoyed the heck out of doing it, but this is kind of the first little radio preview getting into it. Obviously the AP Top 25 came out the other day, and for the most part in the top 10, which is really what I want to be concerned with the most, I really don't have any problem with the current rankings. Obviously, we have the new playoff committee like we did last year, who will be the be-all, end-all when it comes to the rankings. But for the first couple weeks, we've got the AP Top 25, and I think for the most part, I'll read it to you right off the bat. It's Ohio State 1, TCU 2, Alabama 3, Baylor 4, Michigan State 5, Auburn 6, Oregon 7, USC 8, Georgia 9, and Florida State at 10. Now, the only ranking I have a problem with here is Alabama at 3. Alabama is the only one, and it all comes down to quarterback. I really don't feel confident at what Alabama has at quarterback right now. Even last year with Blake Sims, you take Amari Cooper off that Alabama team, that season is a disaster for Alabama. I mean, Amari Cooper saved them. Now, you give Blake Sims credit. He played well down late in stretches for them, but if you take away Amari Cooper from Alabama last season, it plays out much, much differently. In this season, I mean, look, Jay Coker was supposed to win the starting job last summer. He didn't. He lost it out to Blake Sims. Now it seems like all the reports coming out are that Jay Coker, once again, is not in the driver's seat to win that starting job. It seemed now Alec Morris is in that starting seat, and I think at the end of the day, when you look at that uncertainty from Alabama at quarterback, you've got to be really worried, because I'm looking at their rivals, the War Eagles from Auburn. I really think that they're going to be the best team in the SEC this year. I look at Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy Johnson is big, strong, big-arm quarterback. Gus Malzahn had Nick Marshall before him, a guy who is very athletic, run-type first quarterback, not very pass-accurate. Now you bring in a guy like Jeremy Johnson. He's going to give Gus Malzahn so much more flexibility. He's going to make him so much more creative with the play calling. I think Auburn, if I did it, I have Auburn at 3, and I have Alabama at 6 where Auburn is. I honestly flipped those right over. It's only because that quarterback uncertainty, there's a lack of offensive playmakers to help out whoever it's going to be, Coker or if it's going to be Morris. And I think at the end of the day, Alabama might lose 2 games, because we've seen more and more. A lot of these SEC teams, the Kentuckys, the Arkansas, they're getting better and better. They've gotten better each season. We saw Arkansas was a couple minutes away from beating Alabama last year. Kentucky was significantly better last year. So the SEC overall is getting better. And I think at the end of the day, Auburn is the team that if I did it, I have them at number 3. Obviously, though, number 1, Ohio State. Look, at the end of the day, for the safe people are betting Ohio State to win the championship again, and I think, quite frankly, they really are going to. I just think they're returning too many good players. Ezekiel Elliott is back. Playmakers on defense back. They have 2 quarterbacks who could start for any program in the country. Now, that quarterback competition will obviously be settled soon. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be JT Barrett. Cardale Jones does a lot of things very well, throws an incredible deep ball, maybe the best deep ball we've seen in a long time in college football. But I think at the end of the day, what we saw from JT Barrett when he was playing, for me, I mean, he was as much in the Heisman conversation as Mariota or anybody. I mean, he had after that Virginia Tech game, he had a stretch where he led the Buckeyes to 5 straight games with over 500 yards of total offense he was responsible for. Incredible stuff. I mean, whether it's passing accurately or running or as a playmaker, he makes every single play. I think Ohio State is too good. They're double-digit favorites in every game they play this year. I just think they're too good right now. They have too much depth. Urban Meyer is the best coach in college football. I think even over Nick Saban. You look at their records against each other. You look at what their records are in bowl games. Nick Saban, 8 for 8 in bowl games. Urban Meyer, 8 for 2. That is a big, big difference right there, and that's significant. It means something. To me, too much good stuff at Ohio State. I think at the end of the day, they will win this year's national championship again, back-to-back. TCU at number 2, love it. I think Gary Patterson's always been a guy. You knew he was going to be bringing an incredible defense to the table. He's a very, very talented defensive coach, but I still think at the end of the day, his offenses weren't ever mind-boggling. I like what he had under Andy Dalton, but now he's got Trevon Boykin. Trevon Boykin was unbelievable last year. I mean, he finally had an offense to go with his defense, and my goodness, I mean, his team has transformed more into an offensive team, and all early voting, it seems most people are kind of putting him as their Heisman favorites, and I think rightfully so. I think Trevon Boykin can make the plays with his arm. I think he will be a better passer, which is definitely what you want to see from him. There's no doubts about his athleticism, him moving with the football. But I think TCU is going to have a very good year. The only thing that's going to hurt TCU, or Baylor they have ranked at 4 as well, is there's no championship game in the Big 12. And I think last year, that's the thing where there were some people who argued over Ohio State being there because of that loss to Virginia Tech. But, I still think at the end of the conference championship games really mean something. The SEC has one. The Big Ten has one. Not having one for the Big 12 is definitely a big detriment, and it's significant. But I think TCU is going to take care of business enough this year. I just think Boykin, he really only had 1 or 2 games where you kind of were a little weary last year. But overall, I just think he'll be a better quarterback. TCU, Gary Patterson, it's a good combination. It's going to be a good year. I went over Alabama at 3. I don't think they should be there. I really am worried about that quarterback situation, the lack of offensive playmakers. So I switched the Auburn Tigers. I have them going at my number 3. Then number 4, Baylor. Now, Baylor's an interesting one, too. The Bryce Petty era is over. Art Briles, obviously, he's got his system, and I think the system, when you're talking about a Baylor or when I get to Oregon, the system is what's going to help big time with these transition quarterbacks, because when you're able to plug and play these guys, obviously, their offenses go at lightning quick paces, and that helps with the transition game a little bit. So I think right now it seems like we're looking at Seth Russell, and a lot of people have very high praise for him. I haven't really seen much of him yet, but we will get a good look at him soon. And I've read a lot of writers who think Baylor won't skip a beat. Obviously, the defensive side of the ball is what we've been waiting for to see when Baylor will clean that up. But I think right now it's a system. You plug in and play. I think Baylor will still have a good year. And look, when it comes down to it, it's going to be TCU, between TCU and Baylor in that Big 12. And it certainly was a fun matchup last year, TCU losing that one. All the controversy with the playoff committee between who should get in. Should it be TCU? Should it be Baylor? I think we're in store for much of the same, but I do think that you've got to give the edge to TCU for the Big 12, only because you're returning Trevon Boykin. He's a guy who had the entire year under his belt, and you have a new guy in Seth Russell at Baylor. He's going to have his work cut out for him. The next one, number 5, Michigan State. Talking to my good friend Joe D, works over at CBS Radio. He loves Michigan State this year. He thinks Michigan State could be and will beat, I should say, Ohio State. And I definitely won't go that far, but I like Mark D'Antonio a lot. I think he's a very good coach. I think they have an established quarterback there, which it's the biggest thing for me when I go through all these. The number one thing that I put up on my little checklist right here is, do you have a quarterback? That's the number one thing that goes on my checklist. Do you have a quarterback? And that's the biggest reason when I go back to Alabama, I can't check that off because I just don't see one there. They do have one at Michigan State. They have a solid defense at Michigan State. They have a good quarterback at Michigan State. But what did we see last year when Ohio State played Michigan State. How many people picked Michigan State to win that game? The writing was on the walls. I watched a lot of both teams. It's clear who's the better offensive team. It's clear who the better team is. You just look at the personnel for Ohio State. You saw the matchup that happened when they played Alabama. You saw the matchup against Oregon. Ohio State is as big as anybody. These are big boys. These are guys who could go toe-to-toe with the physicality of the SEC. They can match up with anybody. I still don't think anybody is going to beat Ohio State, and certainly not Michigan State. But Michigan State is going to have a good year as well. They play a lot of good teams. I'm looking forward to it. And then you go on to the next one. Again, I did talk about Auburn. I think, like I said, you got to put Auburn at 3, and you've got to put Alabama at 6. I think Auburn gets into the playoff. I just think that whenever people ask me what's the number 1 team you're watching this year, I tell them Auburn, only because Jeremy Johnson, I'm telling you, that's the name that you're going to hear over and over again. Gus Malzahn is as creative as we've ever seen in college football with the way that he runs his offensive systems, his play calling. He now has more creativity. His job's easier now. The reason that Auburn lost the national championship to Florida State is because Florida State had a big-arm quarterback who could get the ball down the field quickly. Auburn did not. He now has that. It's going to make things much easier for him. It's going to give him more creativity, which I know he wants. It's going to be a lot of fun watching the Auburn Tigers this year. Number 7, you go to Oregon, and Oregon is the very interesting one. The Pac-12, a lot of people all over the place. A lot of people like USC. A lot of people think that they're going to be the favorites there. But at the end of the day, I still don't know if I'm ready to dethrone Oregon and Mark Helfrich. Again, it's system. Like I talked about with Baylor, I think the system at Oregon, regardless of what quarterback you have there, is going to help make that transition much, much easier. Now, we've seen a lot of good things from Jeff Loki, who we saw. I mean, Oregon was up so big in so many games last year. He got a lot of play time. But again, then you have the transfer Vernon Adams from Washington, and I think, you know, a lot of people are thinking about him too, but it seems like Loki's had a lot of chemistry with guys. He's done a lot of things. I like him a lot, and right now, I mean, Adams hasn't been around the playbook as much, doesn't have as much first-team reps as he does, so it's going to be interesting to see how Helfrich kind of manages this situation, but I do think the Ducks are in good shape this year, and clearly, when you have a competition like this and the Marcus Mariota era is over, which is a very difficult guy to replace, you still have Royce Freeman, who honestly might be their most physical player. I remember listening to Colin Cowherd, the Herd, last year around playoff time, college football playoff time, and a lot of scouts and personnel people thought Royce Freeman was the most physically gifted and talented player on that Oregon Ducks roster. I think it's much of the same this year. He's very young, he's very strong, he's very fast. I think Royce Freeman is incredibly talented. I think Oregon has a big year. I have no problem with them at 7. 8, USC, again, Oregon USA is going to be very interesting to determine who comes out of that Pac-12, but I think at the end of the day, I like Kessler a lot. I like what Sarkisian kind of did with the building block there. I think that first season was kind of getting his feet back in the door with them, and he did a lot of promising things. Kessler, it could do some nice things for them as well. It's just at the end of the day, I think Oregon still has a lot, and I just think their lightning quick offense, again, when you have a system like that, quarterbacks learn more quickly, they get more comfortable more quickly. It takes a lot of pressure off of them with the spacing Oregon has, and especially when you have a running back behind you like Royce Freeman, it makes everything easier. So I do still think Oregon for me. I'm not ready to dethrone them. Then at the end of the day, number 9, we're getting 9 and 10 and wrapping it down. Number 9, you have Georgia, and Nick Chubb is the guy. Nick Chubb, their running back. If you watched the bowl games last year, you saw some of Nick Chubb. He is a monster. I mean, you go from Todd Gurley to Nick Chubb. Chubb can just flat out run. He is a bulldozer. I mean, he's a bulldozer with speed, and he is good. Again, like I talked about back at the beginning with the quarterback thing, that's what you don't have at Georgia right now. It seems like it's a battle between Bryce Ramsey, Grayson Lambert, and again, I'm very weary of that, especially in the SEC now. Now, it's nice that you can be reliable in college football and go back on your running back, but if you really, really want to make a realistic push for this playoff, it's like just like the NFL. You need a quarterback. You need somebody who can throw the football. And if you don't, you better have a darn good running offense behind him. And I just don't think Georgia right now, too many answers with quarterback. But again, at 9, I think Mark Richt is as good as it comes. You're still going to have a good year with Georgia. Number 10, finishing it off, the FSU, Florida State Seminoles. And again, right now, it's the quarterback competition. But here, it's a little bit more confidence, I would say. I mean, Everett Golson had such a weird year last year. I mean, he played well, but just the turnovers were just such a problem. I mean, honestly, I think he had every single game he had except for 2. He had an interception or something like that in them. It was a major problem last year. If Everett Golson stops the turnovers, I mean, he's as dynamic as it comes in college football. Guy can throw the football. Guy can run with the football. Guy is a big, strong athlete. He's got so many good intangibles. But again, at the same time, you are very worried, and you can't be turning that football over. Jimbo Fisher is not going to have any patience for turning the football over. And Sean McGuire is the guy behind him. Now, obviously, he had a big spot, Sean McGuire, when Jameis Winston had that one-game suspension for his conduct on the FSU campus. McGuire was put into a big spot, a big game against Clemson, and he stepped up and he won that game. I mean, that game, he led some big drives, made some big plays, and you've got to think, I mean, I've heard Jimbo Fisher talk very highly about him. So at the end of the day, I mean, we still don't know. I mean, look, Golson's got a lot of experience. Golson's got a lot of talent. But Jimbo Fisher's not a guy who's afraid to go with his gut. And at the end of the day, neither of these guys winning the starting job would surprise me. At the end of the day, I do think it probably will be Golson because, again, Golson's got a lot of experience. McGuire is still very young. But you never know. Again, if Golson gets that starting job and he starts turning the football over, Jimbo Fisher's not going to have any problem switching him for McGuire. He's not going to tolerate that. He's really not. With an ACC that I think is for the most part very open, I think Georgia Tech again will be right there. Duke is going to be competitive again. They're playing very well. Dave Cutcliffe has done a fantastic job there. But I just think FSU, the ACC is very open. I really don't think that if Everett wins that job, Jimbo has any problem taking him out and disciplining him if he's turning that ball over. But kind of a little preview of the top 10, just the initial thoughts on the top 10, getting ready, segueing into the season. The Friday, we'll have another show going over the top 5s of each position for any of you college football fantasy players. The TV show will be back as it was last semester. It's an incredible time. Cannot wait. But Jersey Joe, this has been the Sports Vault. Follow me on Twitter at SportsVaultIona. Gonna end it here. Went a little bit over time, but it's okay. People in the back kind of giving me the signal. Wrap it up. So, I'm going to stop it here. Be right back. Don't go anywhere.